Okay, well, so Evans Pritchard was a person who spent his career in the field, mostly in Eastern Africa, with real people studying their real beliefs and practices. And so I think it's probably does justice to his work if we spend a little time looking at the examples that he himself studied and that he thought were crucial to really understanding religion. And the first is a group of people called the Azandi, who live in what is now the country of Sudan. Most of them live in the new nation of South Sudan in East Africa. And their religion is very complex and includes a lot of different aspects of belief and practice. So we're not going to cover the whole of their religion here. It's like most religions, too complex and too big a thing to really cram into a couple of PowerPoint slides. But the area that Evans Pritchard focused on the most was on Zandi beliefs about witchcraft. And so one of the basic assumptions of the Zandi worldview, one of the basic things that they believe is beyond question, is that witches exist. And they believe that witches are people who have inherited a substance that compels them to cause harm to others. However, witches only actually harm people because they, like all humans, have the occasion to harbor ill will toward their fellow humans, to feel angry, to feel jealous, to feel hatred, and other negative emotions. We all feel these things, but witches have this special supernatural substance within them that enables them to tap into a supernatural power to cause harm to those whom they dislike. And Evans Pritchard approaches Zandi witchcraft from several angles. First, and I remember that I said that he's an eclectic thinker, so he borrows from a number of different other theorists. He says, look, Zandi witchcraft actually serves social functions, following the sociological tradition of Durkheim. So, for example, witchcraft beliefs help produce conformity to social norms. Witches are thought to be socially disagreeable. Therefore, if you're uncooperative, impolite, grumpy, you're a person who might be accused of witchcraft. Now that's maybe a little harsh, and you sometimes feel grumpy, justifiably perhaps. But the point is that people who fit this profile risk being accused of witchcraft, and so there's an incentive to behave in socially appropriate ways. You could say that one message of witchcraft is, don't be a grump. And certainly that's something that you could argue makes society run a little more smoothly. So there's social function here. At the same time, people are encouraged to behave well toward others because they're afraid of offending somebody who actually is a witch. And if you offend somebody by being impolite to them or whatever, wronging them in any way, they might try to get revenge for that behavior by seeking your misfortune. So the message is here slightly different. Be good to your neighbors because one of them might be a witch. And wronging them could have some very serious consequences for you. So that's kind of a sociological aspect to Evans Pritchard's approach to witchcraft, but he also took an intellectualist approach to witchcraft as well. And he makes it clear that witchcraft is a source of explanations for the people. He knows that the Zandi are generally very curious and logical. They're interested in discovering how the world around them works. They do value practical knowledge. They often seek natural explanations for events. However, they also supplement natural explanations with explanations that refer to witchcraft. Here's an example of how this might work. The Azandi are farmers, and they store their grain in granaries built on wooden stilts. Because their area is often very hot, people sometimes seek shade under granaries. However, sometimes termites eat the posts of the granary, and when it collapses, whoever's sitting under it could be seriously injured or killed. Now the question is, for the Zandis, why does this happen? And so to start with, they know that termites eat wooden posts, and that they can cause termites can cause granaries to collapse. This is the natural explanation for the physical event of the collapsing granary. However, they also want to know, why was that particular person sitting under the granary when it collapsed? The natural explanation doesn't address this why him or why her question, but the Azandi have an answer. They believe that witches are able to manipulate events so that a specific individual is in the right place at the right time, or you could say the wrong place at the wrong time, so that they come to harm from a collapsed granary. So if you look at this carefully, you see that they use a natural explanation for the collapse, but they use a supernatural explanation to explain why a particular person was harmed or killed by the collapsing granary. They use witchcraft to explain the misfortune of the individual, not necessarily the collapse itself. So, Tyler would find support here for his intellectualist theory. Tyler would likely admit that the Zandi are rational people seeking explanation for puzzling events. But he would also say that they are primitive people experiencing an inferior state of knowledge. According to Tyler, if you think back to the way he looked at things, he might say if only they knew more science, they would abandon their silly witchcraft beliefs. But Evans Pritchard's analysis reveals a flaw in this early intellectualist idea. So he's building on Tyler, but he's also rejecting some of Tyler's thinking. To the Zandi, he says, there's no conflict between natural and supernatural explanations. They exist together, and they even complement each other. The Zandi know the scientific reason for the granary's collapse. The termites ate the poles. Gravity. The poles weren't strong enough to hold up the granary anymore. But science doesn't tell why a particular person was affected. To answer that, the Zandi refer to witchcraft. So, no amount of scientific knowledge will result in an end to their witchcraft beliefs. The two ways of seeking knowledge, science and religion, simply address different questions. Science explains what happened in physical terms. Religion, in this case witchcraft beliefs, explain the why questions, like why some people were hurt and not others. Second, Evans Pritchard disagrees with the idea that the Azandi have a worldview that is irrational or deficient in some way. Instead, he argues that their worldview is simply based on different basic assumptions about the world. Assumptions like witches exist. Once these assumptions are accepted, Zandi explanations for things like the collapsing granary follow in a logical manner. If we follow this line of reasoning, we must all admit that we have worldviews that are based on certain fundamental assumptions from which we draw other conclusions. God exists. God doesn't exist. But some of these basic assumptions might be wrong, some might be right. That's another question. The point to Evans Pritchard was that all people are rational, and their worldviews are logically consistent. What makes them different is that they start from basic assumptions, different basic assumptions. So I want to make sure you see here that Evans Pritchard is trying to draw all people into the orbit of his thinking. And he's saying, look, we're all in the same boat. Whether we're Zandi, or we're English Catholics like himself, or we're atheists, or whatever. We all have these basic assumptions, beyond which we will not allow to be questioned. And once you understand what those basic assumptions are, the rest of the worldview follows in a logical manner. There's a second example that I want to cover with Evans Pritchard here, but first I want to take a pause and we'll go into another video and we'll look at the newer. So take a break and come back for that. Thanks.